Hello and welcome back. So in today's tutorial, we're going to actually, instead of doing a health system first, I'm going to go back and, well, not go back, we're going to create a pause game over UI. So we're going to create a menu that pops up when you don't have any lives, as well as being able to pause the game as you're playing through it. And because in the health system, especially with the number of lives, it's going to be calling this game over menu anyway. So it's easier, I think, to do it this way. So we're going to create this first, and then we'll look at doing the health and life system. Okay, so as with before, so to create that UI, if you remember, so before we had this, the one that we created, so it's the same thing. The difference is we do need to create an empty game object. Because what's going to happen is so in our game view, we have this. If we try to just so if we go create a UI, it's going to attach it to this, to our game view canvas. And then you would have to kind of deactivate it and then set it up. And so anyways, I think it's easiest. So we're going to create an empty game object, and then we're going to call this game over pause. And then on that, we're going to right click on that game over pause game object we created. We're going to create a UI. And this time we're going to create a panel. So we're going to create a panel, and you can see that the screen changed slightly. And what that does is it creates a panel over top. And I'm going to shrink this down a little bit. So let's make it 0.9. And actually, let's make it 0.92, 0.95. We'll set the y to 0.95 as well. So that's going to create this panel that's going to pop up when you pause the game and so on. So the in behind, so it's transparent, and you can play with the transparencies in that to see what works better for you. So in the canvas, so this is so I'm going to again rename this just so we know. So this is our game over pause canvas. And then in there currently we have a panel. So if we go, so I'm going to go back to the scene view so that we can kind of look at what we're working with. So in here, we're going to have a few things. So in the game over pause canvas, we're going to create a text. So create UI text. We're going to call this game over. And I'm going to change the size of this. So I'm going to make it 80. And again, you need to use the rect tool to make this big enough that you can see that game over text, because otherwise the text box is too small. So I think that looks good like that, and we'll try to center it in between our stats as well as the other border in the panel. So I think that looks good like that. And then what we're going to be doing is creating buttons to allow us to move, so be able to continue the game, restart the game, or to just quit. So we're going to create a button. So go to UI, and we're going to create a button, and that creates this little button here. So we can scale the size of this. So first I'm going to put in the text. So if you click on the button and we look at the text, we're going to change the text to, so this is just going to be continue. So we're going to continue the game. And again, I'm going to change the text size so it's bigger. So let's go with 25. Let's go with 35. And we can, again, use the rect tool to make this button bigger. Okay, so I was in the text when I dragged that, so I just undid it, so Control Z. So make sure you're in the button and then go to the rect tool. So now you can stretch the button to change the size of it. And now we'll go to the text and we'll call this continue. And we'll change the font size. So let's make it 30. Let's make it 35. And I'm going to move the button so that it's up. No, again, I'm in the text. So Control Z. So we want to move the button. So make sure you have the button selected. And we'll move it up there. So I think that looks good. Actually, while I'm doing it now, so again, same as we did for our other one, we want to, because again, this will change when we change this. So we want this as, so the target the UI scale mode. So we want to scale with screen size. And so again, it changed it a bit. That's fine like that, actually. I think it looks good. And then I am going to move I'm going to move the game over text down a bit. And I'm going to leave actually I'll move the button. Actually, I think the button looks fine there. And from there, again, I'm going to rename some of these things just so that, again, you can keep track of when we're moving them. So game over text. And then my button, I'm going to rename to the continue button. And the text is attached to that, so that's fine. I don't need to worry about that text. And now we want to, and rather than add another button, I'm just going to duplicate these. So I'm going to duplicate another one and move it down a bit. And then I'm going to duplicate again and move it down. And again, I'm just using the up-down arrow so it keeps them centered in terms of being lined up with each other. And I have the text selected there. So I'm going to move that up a little bit, and I'm going to move this button, no, the last button up a little bit. Okay, so I think that looks good like that. So now we want to change the names of these. So this button we're going to rename. So I'm going to change the name of this one, call it Restart Game. So that's going to reset the game back to the level 1, so it's just going to restart the game. So you're going to start all over. And again, as I did with the other, I'm going to rename this. So restart button. And then the last one is going to be a quit button, so where you can quit and exit the game. So I want to change the text. Change this text to quit. And again, I'm going to change the name of the button to quit button. And that's it. So what's going to happen, so currently in our game view, this is active, right? So we don't want this game view so we don't want this active as you're trying to play the game because you can't see anything. So what we're going to do is, so our panel, we're going to, our game over canvas, we're going to set as inactive. But we also want, so when you're just in pause, we don't want that to show up, right? So if you just pause the game, we don't want the game over to show up. So we're going to set the game over text to inactive. So by clicking up here, it turns it off. And then similarly, our game over pause canvas, we're going to set as inactive as well. And then we're going to get that and have it come in. So in our game object, so the game over pause, we're going to add a component and we're going to add a script. And the script we're going to just call game over pause. So create and add that. I'll let it compile. Okay, so as we did with the other canvas, we need to make sure we identify using Unity engine.ui. So because we're using the UI system, so I can get those. And we're going to create a few variables here. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create the game object. So we're going to create a public game object, and we'll just call it game over pause screen. It's a fairly long name, but that's fine. So game over pause screen, actually, oh, that's fine. I'll leave it like that. So this is a game over pause screen, which now we'll be able to drag that into the inspector. So our thing that we set inactive, and then we're going to be able to turn it on. And then we also want to set a Boolean, so public static bool, which is going to be called, so we just want to identify when the game is paused. So let's call this game is paused. And we'll set this to false. So currently the game, so we don't want it to be paused when we're playing initially. And then lastly, we're going to create a text, so a public game object. And actually these could be private. So this, yeah, actually I'm going to serialize field these and make these private. So serialize field. And this is a private game object. And then we're going to also serialize field. And create a private game object. And we're going to call it the game over text. So game over text. So we'll be able to turn that game over text to be on and off depending on whether you've died or not. So that's it for this part of it. So that creates kind of the variables that we're going to need in our update. So we're not trying to call any of the components and so on. So in our update, we're going to be setting this. So what we want to do, so in our update, if input dot get key down is key code, so key code dot escape. So if you hit the escape key, it's going to set the game into pause, right? So if we hit the escape key, and what we want to identify is, are we paused yet? So if the game is paused, so if game is paused, so if we're already paused, then we're going to resume the game. So it's going to just resume the game. So we're going to need to create a function down here called resume. So I'm going to do that now. So void, actually these have to be public or else we won't be able to call them in the button when we're doing the buttons. So public void resume, put our braces in. So that's one of our functions there. Else, so if input.get key code, so if the game is paused, we're going to resume. Else, so the game is not paused yet, we're going to pause the game. And again, so now we need to create a public void pause. So we're going to create a public void pause, put our braces in, and then from there now we can kind of work through and set what's going to happen. So in the game over pause, what we're going to do is set our game object active, right? So we want to, so it's paused, so we want to set our game over pause screen to active. So game over pause screen is going to be, so game over pause screen dot set active is true, right? So it's going to turn that game over pause screen on. And then similarly, we want to, when we resume the game, we're going to turn that game over pause screen false. So I'm going to just copy that up over here, click that, and we're going to turn our game over pause screen to false. And then similarly, we need to identify what is happening here. So when we resume the game, we want, right, because we need to kind of go back up here because it's really calling these functions based on here. So if the game is paused, so that's using our Boolean. So we need to identify now. So when we resume, we want our game is paused. So game is paused is going to be set to false, right? Because we're resuming the game, so now that is false. And vice versa, when we do go into pause, we want our game, oops. So game is paused is going to be true. So now the game is paused. Okay, so the other two buttons that we have are going to be, so we have the public void quit is going to be the one of the buttons. So in that quit button, we actually, I guess I could have done that last. I'll do that last. I'll keep them in the order. So we have the public void restart game. And in the restart game, all we're really doing is we're going to restart the game. So what we want to do is we're going to get the scene manager. So this is new. You haven't seen this before. So scene manager dot load scene. And then we can identify what scene we're going to load. So in this case, we just want to restart the game. So we're reloading scene 1. So your scenes are labeled up. So these are the scenes, right? So currently we only have the one scene. So this is scene 1. So we're going to load scene 1. And as we did with the UI, it needs to get those scripting tools, I guess, in terms of using those. So we want to, again, using Unity Engine Scene Management. So using Unity Engine Scene Management, oh, sorry, it's not space, so that should be a period. So using Unity Engine .scene management. And that's going to allow that to work. And then for the public void quit, it's simply application dot quit and then the parentheses, and that's going to just quit the game. So it'll close the game and take you back to your desktop. And I didn't have a semicolon there, so that's why that little error is there. And I think this is good. So we're going to save this and I'll let it compile. Okay, so I do have an error here, and that's because the auto kind of type took this as, so game is paused. That's not what I want to do. I want to run this method. So I want to run the pause method. So that's why that error was there. So I'll save it again. Okay, so after it is compiled, so again, in our inspector, we created these. So the game over pause screen is this. So this is what we're gonna, so currently it's inactive. And when we run the script, it's going to turn that game over pause canvas to be on. And then similarly, we want to take our game over text, and that's going to go into the game over text spot here, which will then be able to turn that on compared to the other objects there. So to get the buttons to work, we need to go into our, so let's turn this on first so we can get to our buttons here. And so in order to get the buttons to work, what you do is, so if we look at the continue button, so down at the, so if you click on the continue button, and down here there is a on click, right? So an on click event, we want to add something in there. So click the plus, so we're going to add an on click event. So that means when you click the button, it's going to happen. So the game object that you have your script on, which is the game over pause game object, you drag it down into that object there, and then we can run the function. So if you go down to game over pause, we want to run, so game over pause, we're running the resume function. So we're going to resume the game, right? And that's it. So to run the restart button, we're going to do the same thing. So our restart button, we want to add a click. We're going to go game over pause canvas, and that's, or sorry, that's not what we're dragging down. So we'll go back to the restart button. We're dragging the game object, and I did that again. So restart button, go down to the click event, so where our script is, so the game over pause game object, drag it in, and then again we're going to change the function. So click on the no function, game over pause, and this time we're restarting the game. And then quit, you do the same thing. So quit, go down, we're going to add a click event, drag our game object down, and then again we're going to add the quit function to it. So now when you click that, it's going to quit the game and so on. So that's that. So everything should work. So if we push play, so when I push play, I forgot to, let's stop that. So I forgot to turn our game over canvas off, right? So we don't want it on currently. So turn it off. Now push play. And now when we play through, we should be able to hit escape, and it should go into pause and so on, right? So I can move, escape, the game pauses, I can continue, everything works good. If I collect the cherry, hit escape, restart the game, it resets us back, and now we don't have any cherries because we restarted the game. The quit button won't work until you are actually running the game, and then it'll quit the application. So in the editor, the that quit function application can't work. Now the one thing that we're going to add as well, so if you hit escape and go into pause, you can see the game isn't paused, and in fact you can still play the game and move around, right? So we do want to add one other thing into the script here. So what we want to add is when the game is paused, we want to set the so the time.timeScale equals 0. right? So that's going to set the time to 0, so everything's going to freeze. And then when we resume, we want to set the time.timescale equal to 1. So we're just setting the timescale back so that everything's moving relative to time. If you wanted to speed up time, you could actually increase this, which is going to get everything to move faster, right? So there might be spots where you want that. So we'll save this out. Okay, so when you play now, when I pause, right, the screen is frozen. I can't move my character. That's good. That's the way we want it. And then when you continue, or if I hit escape, right, the game restarts. Or it doesn't restart, sorry, it just, the character starts to move again. So that's it for the game over pause menu. In the next video, we'll look at getting that game over text to become active, as well as then finishing up the health, or not finishing up, I guess doing the health system as well as our lives. So that's it for this video. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.